second panel, which is Knowing Your Value, Commercializing the Game. And this is a really important conversation, critical from a brand perspective, from a media rights holder's perspective, and from a marketing perspective. So we in this panel will be talking about the complexity of knowing your value, shining a spotlight on the men and women who are leading the charge on this front, closing the gender gap when it comes to commercializing the game, revenue, airtime, media coverage, and fan perspectives. We'll ask the question, is increased attention to women's sports actually converting to increased sponsorship and support for female athletes? And how has the sports sponsorship landscape changed for women over the years? We will have a keynote, we will have a panel in-house, but we will be throwing to a video right now with Angela Ruggiero, who, if you're a hockey fan, you know she was a badass gold medalist and a 4-time Olympian, and she is currently CEO and co-founder of the Sports Innovation Lab.
Hi, I'm Angela Ruggiero, a 4-time Olympian in the sport of women's ice hockey, Olympic gold medalist, Hockey Hall of Fame member. I loved hockey. I loved playing sports. After I played, I went on to serve on the IOC as a member and then executive board member. And while I was at the IOC, I'm very proud to initiate the Gender Equality Review Project way back in 2017, and currently serve on the Gender Diversity and Equity Inclusion within the IOC. My background, obviously, as an athlete, I served as the president of the Women's Sports Foundation, a board member there. I care very deeply about the subject we're about to learn about. What I do now is I founded and am CEO of a company called Sports Innovation Lab. We're a market research company. We were built to empower the industry to be a better version of itself through data insights and innovation strategy. We focus on helping the whole sports ecosystem around understanding their consumer, in order to better represent their fan base, build better innovation strategy, and use data really at our core to advise our clients and to build sport, to have more impact in women's sports, to have social impact, to just be a more inclusive, innovative, forward-thinking approach to the market. So we're very much aligned to SIGA's mission to have a positive impact through sport. And I'm incredibly excited today to announce that Sports Innovation Lab has been accepted as a member of SIGA. We're really looking forward to bringing our research capabilities to the SIGA ecosystem and continuing to push for sustainable practices that promote the integrity of sport globally that we all love. So special shout out, thank you to Emmanuel for his guidance throughout this process, for MasterCard for putting this amazing event, partnering Ali to support us, Sandra Lopez, who's put our name forward, many people to thank, but really excited as a company we're part of SIGA. So I want to quickly talk about women's sports. We've done a tremendous amount of research in the women's sports space, kicking off a few years ago with the groundbreaking report called the Fan Project. Google it, look it up, download it. It's great. What we found through this research in the Fan Project was that women's sports is one of the biggest growing trends in the sports market, full stop. We found that these fans of women's sports, that's men and women, are avid. They're loyal. They're absolutely hungry for more. There is a tremendous amount of demand in this market that we can't capture today. There isn't enough inventory. There isn't enough supply, but the demand is there. Fans are hungry. They're these future consumers. They want more. So fans of women's sports love it. They're depth over breadth, as I always say. In our second groundbreaking report, titled The Growth of the Women's Sports Community, we actually conducted the largest observational spending study ever for the women's sports sector. We looked at where fans are actually spending their money versus taking a survey and saying they love women's sports. No, where were you putting your money? And what we found through that report was that despite the fact that women's sports receives only a fraction of media coverage and sponsorship investment, just a fraction, we're already behind the curve. In spite of that, we found that fans of women's sports, this community specifically, is growing at a rate significantly higher than that of the general sports fan. Let me repeat that. If you think about the acquisition and retention, the growth rate of this community in particular, it's off the charts. So women's sports fans are growing at a clip much, much higher than the general sports fan or than any other sector that we looked at. So fans of women's sports are growing. There's high demand, but they're also purpose-driven. They're digitally savvy. They're this future consumer that the entire sports market should watch. Yes, there's a big opportunity to support and see it grow, but also it's the future consumer. We call it the fluid fan. The fluid fan lives in the women's sports community because they have to. They're downloading, they're figuring out where their content is or figuring out how to follow these athletes. It's a really interesting sector to understand and to support because it's only on its up and up. And this research has led us to a big announcement. Today, we are actually announcing the official launch of the Women's Sports Club powered by Ally Financial with the goal of improving media and investment in this landscape. So we're going to convene some of the most influential buyers and sellers in the women's sports ecosystem to facilitate a dialogue to continue to figure out how do we invest more? How do properties, brands, and media companies come together to invest and amplify women's sports? So let's break this cycle. Let's go hard at this consumer. Let's build a better place for our daughters, for our sons to have more female role models. Let's do more to make the women's sports ecosystem thrive. I'm really proud to be a part of that conversation, really proud to be here with SIGA, and want to just thank everyone here for your continued support of women's sports, and I wish you the best today in the conference.
Full disclosure, I had no idea that Angela was going to make that announcement about Sports Innovation Lab teaming up with Ally Financial. If you're not familiar with Ally Financial, this is one of the brands that is truly setting the standard when it comes to supporting women in sports. Because what do we know? Media dollars drive decision making. Ally has made the decision and the commitment that over the next 5 years, they are going to be doing equal spends on men's and women's sports. They are a primary sponsor. I don't know if they're one of the founding sponsors for the National Women's Soccer League. They are, thank you. See, I've got my fact checker right in the front row. Thank you, Katie. But as a sponsor of the NWSL and the games air on CBS and Paramount Plus, Ally Financial went to CBS and said, you want our dollars? Guess what you're going to do? You're going to put the NWSL championship game on CBS, not on Paramount Plus, but you're going to put it on CBS. Not only are you going to put it on the mothership, but you're going to put it on primetime. And they did. These are the types of decisions that come from leaders like Andrea Brimmer, the CMO at Ally Financial, who, by the way, was a soccer player at Michigan State. So we're going to connect those dots there. These are the types of decisions that brands make that can drive sustainable impact. So I had no idea that Angela's going to announce that, but that's like totally baller, so yay. We now have a full panel to dive deeper into this discussion. On our panel today, we have Coley Anderson, SVP and Chief Growth Officer of the WNBA. For our friends globally, if you don't know the WNBA, you should watch. It's the Women's National Basketball Association. Courtney Copatelli, the VP of Partnership Activation at Major League Baseball. David Pachowski, Head of Global Marketing Partnerships and Collaborations for Team Sports at Wilson Sporting Goods. That is a title. Katrina Polanka, VP of Global Partnerships for Spurs Sports and Entertainment. And moderating this discussion will be Christine Franklin, EVP of Octagon, which also happens to be a member of SIGA. Thank you all so much for being here today. The floor is yours.
I'm going to do a little, hold on, we're just going to
A little
do a
rework.
little, so we can be conversational. We're going to do a semicircle. So there's a lot of us. All right, good, perfect. Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about commercializing the women's game today. I think that Bonnie did a great job of introducing us already, so I won't reintroduce. But when we get to some of the questions, I'll have people give a little bit of color around what they do for the organization they work with and maybe what inspires them to work in women's sports or not in women's sports, but want to influence or impact the women's sports in general. We're going to start with like something very broad just because it's fun. It's a topical thing. This is another year for women's sports, massive year with the Women's World Cup coming up. and we're going to get right to controversy because that's how we roll. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding the tournament with the announcement of Visit Saudi's partnership of FIFA World Cup. What do you think? I'm going to start with Coley because she took the end seat over there.
Thank you so much. No, listen, it's so nice to be here, and thank you for having me. I think ultimately what drives women's sports is the play on the field, the play on the court, and it's our players and our coaches, and that's the product that we're commercializing, right? So we have to listen to those voices. And so, you know, in this case, it's protecting the rights and beliefs and values of the players, and they're putting that to their power, and whether it, you know, the game happens as it's planned or it's protested or, you know, I think what's important is listening to the players. And that's something that at the WNBA is the heart of everything we do.
Would you like to, Katrina, you want to take a?
Good. Couldn't agree more.
Couldn't agree. Great. Okay. Next up. So as we're talking, one of the key things about women's sports over time is we are really growing participation at the youth levels. Women and men, but mostly girls, are earning more spots on the field. And if you look at the numbers in 2019, we're now 3.4 million participants at the high school sport level. In 1972, we were only 294,000 for girls. Now, this still pales in comparison to boys, who are 4.5 million. But what does it mean for the growth of the women's game, commercially and from a business perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us on the Wilson side, it's an incredible opportunity for us to grow the women's game, especially at the grassroots level, right? And then for me in particular, it's the first time I'm on the endemic side of the brand side, so it's cool to be able to impact play on the field, like actual play on the field with our product. So for us, we take a very intentional approach in wanting to grow the game on the grassroots level, high school level, leading into college and professional. And a lot of it's driven around our product, but I think the cool part and something that we're hoping to instill a little bit more is storytelling of that, right? So it's one thing to actually have a ball in your hands, but what does that mean to girl, female athletes, right? And that's one way that we are able to grow the brand, commercialize, obviously, the sport, but give a voice to the female athlete, which I think is incredibly important.
For the Spurs, we're re-optimizing all of our partnerships around building leaders and legacies, particularly attacking a data point that states 94% of women in C-suite roles played sports. That means that if you can get more girls in sports, you build a more diverse leadership pipeline. So at the Spurs, it's our goal to get 10 million girls playing sports by 2032. And when I say playing, we don't just mean athletes, we mean participation in sports. So we think sports journalism, we think STEM, we think all of the front office roles that we can start to train the next generation of women to be. And a lot of that stems from inspiring the next generation of women through storytelling of women who have done it or are pursuing it. So we're re-optimizing all of our impact programming around gender equity and what it means to get girls starting to play. We know that by the age of 17, 51% of girls are going to quit sports for a myriad of reasons, right? Their bodies are changing, there's a social stigma around it, but we know that if you stick with it, you're building teamwork, leadership, confidence, all of the skills that you need to eventually crack the code on being in the C-suite.
It's a great stat. Love that one. Courtney, what does it mean from a fan perspective? Because you're really in charge of sponsorship activation at Major League Baseball, and girls and boys are both watching baseball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the female audience is a key one to us. Our marketing team is doing a lot, especially this coming season, to capture more of that female fan. Things like bringing baseball to more culturally relevant environments and events like food fests and concerts and fashion shows, just to make it ingrained more in the culture. Technology is a key of ours to be able to make it easier for people to plan trips to the ballpark by buying food and tickets and merchandise that is probably a little bit more appealing to females who tend to be more of the planners. And then also our content. Our content is just going to take on more of a lifestyle approach, featuring players, celebrities, MLB ambassadors, all targeted toward the female audience. That is just such a key, important one to us. And then just also mention on the youth side, youth development is so important to us on both the baseball and the softball side, and we continue to grow those initiatives and put resources against it.
And this is for anyone, but really, what are the brands doing to influence that you're working with the partners and activating? How are they activating differently maybe than they did 5-10 years ago? What are they doing now that is different that can influence that?
For us, it really starts with program design. So as an example, this past season, we launched the Spurs Community Leadership Institute. In December of 2021, we reevaluated what our approach is. And we really just looked at what the Spurs are already really good at doing, which is building leaders. I mean, a third of NBA coaches come from Coach Pop's tree. That means we're an incubator for leadership. How do we apply that to leaders that are not just on the court, but leaders off the court as well? So we launched the Spurs Community Leadership Institute. It's a cohort of 10 nonprofit leaders, and the idea is if you train someone, they're going to train 10 others who are going to train 10 others who are going to train 10 others. And so we hand-selected 10 future nonprofit leaders. They're going through a month, throughout the season, so a year-long program, and we're working with our brand partners to design the program around key areas of learning, including finance, budgeting, all of the skills that you'll need, marketing. They'll go through a course with a few different leaders within our organization. And if you almost think back to the origins of what sponsorship is, right? Our brands are sponsoring each of those leaders, and they're paying for essentially a spot for that leader to be trained across all of these different skills and work their way through the program. So this year it was focused on nonprofit leaders, specifically in the mental health space, knowing how important that was coming out of the pandemic. The idea is to then expand that and look into other types of industries. If we could do one specifically around future women leaders, do one around other areas in tech. That's the evolution of that program.
Coley, how about you tell us about the Changemakers program?
I would love to. So at the WNBA, we launched our Changemakers program. This is a collective of very powerful organizations committed to growing the WNBA with us for our players and the communities in which we play in, as well as the league. So as we've embarked on our transformation, it started when Kathy Engelbert came on as our CEO. The founding partner in Changemakers is AT&T, and AT&T is really has a platform around She's Connected, right? So part of what this is, it's not just a one-way sponsorship that everyone is so used to. It's about establishing a two-way partnership. So these brands, which now include AT&T, Deloitte, US Bank, Nike, and Google, will have all of your traditional assets and logos and marketing benefits, but we're also helping them in their DE&I initiatives, in their gender and pay gap initiatives, and really working together to grow women's sports and to meaningfully change the dynamic that exists in not just sports, but in the business world. Another part of Changemakers is not just what happens on the court, but what happens off the court, right? So we always say we have 144 of the best basketball players in the world, but they all have two stories. It's them on the court and off the court. So there's 288 stories to be told. So with Deloitte, who has really helped us with our business transformation, they're working with the league, but they're also working with the players. What about internships? What does it look like after a WNBA player comes off the court? The average career is only 5 to 7 years. And as you know, our players are, limited in their opportunities because the season's only 4 months. So how can we extend that? What can we do with them beyond just those 4 months on the court? Another thing is Another company who's really stepping up is Google. Google has been working with our amazing partners at ESPN, ensuring that all of our playoff games are on broadcast television. That's huge for us. US Bank is teaching financial literacy to the players. Nike, of course, is our outfitters, and doing more in the grassroots space as well as we look to develop more youth basketball. But we're excited to grow the Changemakers platform, and we really think it is changing the game as far as how sponsors can work within women's sports.
It's a great program, really giving another level of platform to the brands and to the organization. I want to flip a little bit to the difference between the influence an endemic brand would have on women's sports versus a non-endemic. And Dave, you and I talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, I alluded to it in my answer previously, but for me, it's personally a new experience now working on the endemic side. But I think the impact that endemic brands can make is, I would say, so much more tangible and relatable to the athlete themselves, right? And I've worked at other brands before where we were a corporate partner, right? And so that opens up other opportunities as well, primarily from a funding perspective, et cetera. But when you work at an endemic brand, you actually have the ability to change someone's perspective on the sport or change someone's life by just putting a product in their hands, right? Which is so impactful, especially for the women's game, right? And at the youth level and the grassroots level, all you need is a ball. And sometimes it's that simple, but it is very true. And so we take that to heart, and we understand the power that we hold as a sporting goods company and the responsibility that we have to try to equip every child, right, with a ball that could potentially change their life.
It's awesome. And Courtney, you and I talked a little bit about the influence of baseball and softball, and that baseball and softball are, in the US at least, the highest participation sport for 6 to 12-year-olds. And what is MLB doing to encourage that?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of what I said before, youth development is just a key initiative internally, and we work with across major league, minor leagues, all of the local youth programs that we have affiliations with to increase the fandom, to bring resources to those groups, and just provide support.
Yeah, from an endemic perspective, how do you feel with a changemaker perspective? Like, how do you feel? Is it better to have a founding partner that's endemic? Or is it better to have one that's non? Or is it a combination?
I think it's best to have a partner who is committed to the organization and wants to work with you to create change. That's what we are all about in establishing this platform. If you look at our league, we are a league of 80% women of color. We are a league of LGBTQ plus members. And if, when it comes to youth, if I can see myself, then I can believe that I can achieve as well. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So when we think about our Changemakers platform, whether it's the endemics or the non-endemics, I think it's this collective that's coming together to say, what can we do to change the narrative here? And we're gonna see that in not just partnerships, but media rights, and how we are able to seize this momentum around women's sports and ultimately commercialize it. We at the league did a $75 million capital raise last year. That's never been done before. We're using those proceeds towards digital products, to brand awareness and fan engagement activations. But ultimately, we need more partners to step up. I always say, are all of your consumers men? No, but is all of your sports activation going to men's sports? It is. We need to change that narrative. And I'm not afraid to say that out loud because, it's time that we flip the script. And our Changemakers program is one of the first to do that. But also our work around social justice, DE&I, it's really establishing who we are as a league and bringing in partners who want to tell that story with us.
It reminds me that women are coming of age in their professional sports careers in a time where culture and society is just blowing our minds, and social and digital is so important. How have you leveraged social and digital to reach female fans, sell product? How have you used that platform differently with women's sports programming or reaching fans?
I mean, I can talk about some specific examples our partners have done. Church and Dwight, with their brand Arm & Hammer, sponsors the Jenny Finch Empowerment Award. For anyone who doesn't know, Jenny Finch is a USA softball legend and an MLB youth ambassador. She's been a wonderful partner of ours. And they recognize 4 girls throughout the year for their performance on and off the field in terms of leadership, integrity. They're brought to the World Series. They're announced in the ballpark in front of everyone with Jenny by their sides and just celebrated through content. She plays a game with them at some of our All-Star activities. And it's a really great program, and I think it's a really good way to bring the female audience into the fold. I have to talk about one of my favorite programs, and with my valued partner, MasterCard, the Youth Ambassadors Program. I've had the privilege of being able to work firsthand on this program for the last several years. MasterCard's the presenting sponsor of the MLB All-Star Game. They come into the local market and they bring their Girls for Tech program, which I think you're going to hear a lot about today. And they partner with one of our local youth organizations, bring the programming to the girls, pick 18 to 20 of the girls who will go to the game and who will be announced during the starting lineups, live on Fox. Just being there firsthand, I can tell you the excitement and of not just the girls, but also the way the players embrace it has just been amazing. And I can imagine little girls watching the game at home, and hopefully that will make more little girls want to watch the game at home as we continue to promote this program. It just delivers the same priceless experience to everyone.
Yeah, for us, we are the longest running women's sports league, but we're still on here? Okay. We are the only women's sports league that has our own D2C, our direct-to-consumer platform in the WNBA League Pass. And it's really important. Fans of women's sports have always had to seek out the product, right? They've always had to go digital first. It's never been easy to find us. Our number one goal is to make it easier to be a fan of the WNBA, and digital is the number one way we can do that. So we are launching a new app at the start of the season. We just announced that Athletes Unlimited, if you're familiar with that platform, is actually on our WNBA League Pass. So we're building WNBA League Pass as the streaming home for women's basketball. And one day that might look like the streaming home for all of women's sports. So I think, we're going to continue to reach that Gen Z audience, that female-led audience, because she knows she can find us at WNBA League Pass.
Yeah, and on the product side, we kind of flipped it on its head a bit. So everyone knows and loves the WNBA ball, the orange and white ball. It's so synonymous and iconic, right, with the W. But in order to try to reach a male audience as well and get them more ingrained in the game, we actually made a men's-sized version of the WNBA ball. So WNBA ball is a little bit smaller. And ran that as a campaign on social, obviously through e-com, digital, et cetera. And it was the best performing social campaign of the year last year in terms of conversion for sales. And I want to say it was about 63% of purchasers were male on that. So it just goes to show that there is an interest and demand from the male side to be more ingrained, to be interested in, want to participate in the women's game or be involved in the women's game at some point through a product.
Right, and obviously we all know the term pink it, shrink it and pink it.
Yeah.
But I don't know which one comes first, but
Yeah.
the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah.
But it's really the same. You basically took that model and said, we're not going to do that to the
No,
men. We're not going to
yeah.
make the men use the little ball.
Yeah.
Can we make them wear pink jerseys?
I don't know. I'll leave that to Nike.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do, right? So we touched a little bit. We have a few minutes left, but we touched a little bit about the athletes themselves and how they're personally driving the interest in the women's game and commercial. They're really so invested in themselves, but also in their leagues. How are the athletes themselves really investing in commercializing the sports themselves? Men or women, really. I'm going to start by saying some of our male athletes have actually contributed and are part owners of some of the teams and really promoting their female counterparts. I think the WNBA example,
Yes, I'm fine. I'll just say it. So, you know, it started with Kobe wearing the orange hoodie, right? And we've established the Kobe and Gigi Bryant Advocacy Award for certain players who really go above and beyond. You know, we're thankful for our partnership at the NBA. We're thankful for Adam Silver and everything that, you know, he does to support our growth. We've given the award to the likes of Chris Paul, and Pau just received it this year. But I think it's our athletes who are storytelling and building the narrative. You know, one reason that people maybe don't watch the WNBA is they don't know enough about it, right? They don't know that there's good guys or bad guys. And we are entering our super team era. So we have the New York Liberty, woo! And the Las Vegas Aces, who are building these super teams, but that's the rivalry that people who watch men's sports want. I also think it's really important that our partners utilize our players in their marketing efforts. So you look at someone like CarMax, who put Sue Bird and Candace Parker in their TVC, and not only did they get great feedback from it, but they're internally at their company, we heard the feedback like, wow, it was so great to see a WNBA player, you know, up there in our TV commercial. And we see that across the board. We actually established something called PMA. So these are player marketing agreements. This is part of our CBA, our collective bargaining agreement, where we as the league will pay players to support the league, market the league, and actually work with our partners throughout the course of the season. And I think that's a really unique approach to utilizing players to activate on behalf of partners and activate on behalf of the league. We started that a couple years ago, and it's just grown and grown. We started with 2 PMAs. This year we have 10 PMAs. So it's a model that's working, and we're going to continue to build upon.
love it, love it. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody want to raise their hand? Brave.
Hi, Nicole Jeter-West with Underdog. Question for anyone on the panel, but curious to hear, what are you not seeing from partners as their support, and what would you like to see from partners as it pertains to women in sports, and that you know if there was that sort of additional effort from that partner or the partners in the space, that could help accelerate where we are in women's sports? You get groups that are out there doing it right now and are clearly aligning themselves with women's sports, but there's definitely more to be done. What is it that you're not seeing?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really cyclical, right? So like on the media rights side, you're gonna see this idea that, well, we can't give you the windows because you don't have the viewership. But you don't have the viewership because you don't have the windows. And you don't have the windows because you don't have the partnership dollars. And that just feeds into this vicious cycle. And if you look at women's sports on paper and you just continue to use the old models of valuation, we will never grow. So we'd like to see partners, whether it's in the media space or on the brand side, create a new valuation model for women's sports where you're able to see the non-tangentials, right? So what is the value of our players in the community who are activists and can really galvanize support behind what they're doing? So I think it's looking at those partners like our change makers who are willing to see beyond the spreadsheet model. Because if we stick to that, women will never succeed. Women are always undervalued if you only look at the spreadsheet. So my hope is partners will come on board, and we have great partners already, but we're always wanting more, who will work with us to create a new value model, a new way to flip the script of undervaluing women's sports and really right-size this ship. That was my soapbox, so I'll get off. I'll get off now.
I almost got a flutter in my heart because I've been saying this for so long, and I'm just glad somebody else articulated it better than I have ever. So thank you. We're going to work on that together.
Thank you.
We talked a lot about redesigning the world like that you live in, Courtney, in the sponsorship activation space, and the Spurs is doing a lot to do that as well from a venue perspective. What can we teach this group? What can we teach venues, partners, anyone on how to redesign the space for women?
I think just I spoke a little bit about technology earlier. I think it's very important to infuse that and build products that allow for more people to get access, whether it's streaming or whether it's being able to buy tickets easier, planning your trip to the next game. I feel like technology and leveraging the data that we have already and seeing what those audiences we want to bring more of, what they're interested in, and how we can better meet their needs is probably the key to that.
I think so much of the work is not sexy. So much of the work is not the headline that you're going to read. So much of it happens in a conference room when you have diverse leadership speaking up on how to get there. And that work is never going to make a headline. But at the Spurs, we're really committed to actually doing that work. So we've been working with the Female Quotient to do an internal audit on our own organization. And right now, 30% of our leadership team is women. We're trying to get that up to 50%. Because you don't get to that result if you don't have the right people in the room. And that's never going to be written about in an ad age. We're never going to win an award for that. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the work from the inside and have that be the plan for the next 3, 5, 7 years. And if you have the right people in the room, that's when the magic is going to happen. We're not going to come out the gates solving for these big issues. We need to solve for the systemic reasons why we're not there yet. And for us, it starts with people.
Great. I think that's 100% true. And I think that's kind of goes right back to the mission here at SIGA is to really, and I think Emmanuel mentioned earlier that we have more women board members now than we do male, not on purpose, but just because, and that's fine too. We love male allies as well. We'll find out from some of those folks later. We'll hear from some of those folks later. I just want to recap really quickly because there's some really amazing sound bites, and this is what I like to do. I like to remind people the amazing things that they just told us. Courtney, you talked about redesigning activation for lifestyle and food and better fan experience geared towards women and female fans. I love that. Coley, beyond the spreadsheet, we have a task force. I hope you're not too busy. It's also about two-way partnerships and collaborating in a meaningful way to change. And you do have 144 of the best basketball players on and off the court. Dave, all you need is a ball. I love that, right? It's so true. Sometimes to change someone's life and their trajectory in life, all you need is to hand someone the right equipment. And Katrina, do the work from the inside. We're going to make 10 million we're going to have 10 million girls in sport, leading sponsorship, sports, and maybe playing on new fields in the future and courts. We have a lot of basketball people up here, so I got to say court, not field. Thank you so much for your time and your effort today and for joining me in this conversation. We're going to try to commercialize the game. And next year, hopefully we'll have new stats, new social campaigns that change the game, and a lot more to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
As somebody who moderates a lot of panels, Christine, you did a phenomenal job. So round of applause for Christine, because it's not as easy as she makes it look.
I didn't know she would introduce everyone, so I wasn't totally sure about that, but thank you.
Of course. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Couple of post notes on this panel. Coley was talking a little bit about the player agreements that are now in place at the WNBA. There is a huge opportunity to change the business model in women's sports because the research tells us that female athletes engage in a different, more impactful way with audiences on social. Now, I'm not going to go get granular on that, but when you think about how everything equates to dollars in sports, that's really important. I'll give you an example. In the National Women's Soccer League, Angel City Football Club, which is one of the newest clubs that came online based in LA, they do a couple of different things. Number one, they are allocating 1% of the gate to a fund that goes to any player who's willing to leverage their name, image, and likeness to help sell tickets. So if a player goes on social media and says, hey, come watch us at the bank, the stadium's now changed and I'm forgetting the name of it, but hey, come watch us, and includes a link to Ticketmaster, they get put into that pool. That's not important just because it helps raise the level of money that athletes are making, but it also changes the perspective for fans, because if fans know that they are supporting players by buying tickets, maybe that's a little extra incentive to, instead of watching that game at home, pick up the family, get in the car, make the trip to watch the players play, because they, to a certain degree, are contributing to how much the players they love and want to watch are making. The other thing that Angel City does is for each one of their sponsors, they say, okay, whatever your spend is, 10% of that spend is getting allocated into community initiatives. And when you combine that with the level of engagement that female players have in their community, it's a wonderful way to build business, because ultimately when your community feels invested, they're going to buy tickets. If they go to games, they're going to buy a Coke and a hot dog, and they're going to buy merch. So ultimately, all of these efforts and the willingness to reimagine what business models look like all contribute to the bottom line. So I'm just going to plant that seed, and you can do whatever you'd like with it. So with that, we're going to take a 20-minute break. Is that right, Katie? Take a little 20-minute break. Few reminders. If you're enjoying what you're hearing today, please put it out there on social media. Our 3 hashtags today are SIGA Women, IWD 2023 for International Women's Day, and hashtag Embrace Equity, and a gentle nudge. If you're willing to make a donation to women's leaders, female leaders in sports here at SIGA, it would be greatly appreciated. No amount is too little, and consider a donation, or if you're in the room, hang out with Katie for a little bit during the break to see about becoming a global mentor or a partner. So enjoy the break. We'll be back in 20 minutes. Thank you so much.